Okay, we are live.
Welcome into Shaping Reality. I'm your host, Kimberly, and I'm joined tonight by the lovely and talented Penny Kelly. Welcome in, Penny.
Good to be here. It's good to be here. So
How are you doing?
I'm really doing well. I had just a really intense period about the middle of the month, and now it's sorting itself out, and I'm feeling kind of on top of the world for no real reason at all. However, I did have a phenomenal series of experiences just this past weekend that were kind of mind-blowing, and that has renewed my faith in my forward progress in understanding how do we become beings of light. So that's why I'm feeling on top of the world.
Well, good. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about timeline shifts tonight because that's the topic that the last look-see was based on. And of course, I've seen a couple of videos that you've done since then about timelines. But first, I want to share a personal story that feeds right into this. And the reason I want to share it is because I doubt it's unique. And the story is this. I remember the exact morning. It was the morning of November 7th. So not very long ago. I woke up and the soup around me felt different. I felt different. The soup felt different. Everything was different. And then and it was almost a little effervescent, a little bubbly. And then the next thing that I noticed was that a long list of topics, political topics, social topics, civilizational topics that were very angering to me or very frustrating to me. It was like it just went poof. And I was like, no, I just couldn't even get hooked. It just was like, And then, well, this was November 7th. And I think, Penny, on November 9th, I saw your conversation with John Peterson of the Arlington Institute about the different timeline shifts. And all of a sudden, it made complete difference. It made complete sense to me. So with that, and I know my experience with my reality in this system is that I'm fairly typical. In other words, if I'm thinking it or feeling it, there's going to be a pretty good section of people that are feeling the same thing. So I know that there are people watching right now that are going, let's kind of dive into that topic because I know you've been doing research and whatever it is you do, searching around more since the look-see. So go ahead. Where would you like to start?
Wow. Well, I have to say something about that. That whole story that you just told, you felt different. And one of the things that was part and parcel of that several amazing experiences I had this weekend was that the key was the feeling. If you didn't notice the feeling, then nothing was different. So you have a very clear example of noticing that it felt different. Didn't matter. You couldn't get hooked. Couldn't hardly get interested in that whole worry thing anymore. My question to you would be, what is your body knowing that it's telling you about all those issues, political things that make you angry? Your body knows something, and it's shocking to you. So what do you think that, if you had to spell it out, seems kind of obvious, but say it anyway.
I think that for me, at least where I look at it now, it almost, the conflicts almost seem childlike.
Oh, gosh.
I just like, okay, I go, I don't even, go ahead. I'm going to go over here. It just doesn't at all. And my focus now is continually, Penny, what can we create?
Yes.
What can we do? what should we build? What can we,
Yeah.
it's like I want to go do stuff, make stuff, create stuff,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And if I'm doing that, which I don't even want, it's like, you know, so it's just a
Right.
shift, which is almost, it's very interesting to me because I was trying to get out of that anger and frustration prior and then just woke up in a different place.
That's what happened. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm,
I noticed that same kind of change or shift after I was in the hospital after that emergency surgery.
mhm,
There was this, I really wasn't interested in following all the people I had been watching, listening to,
mhm,
gauging, this is what I'm getting. Oh, they're getting something similar, or that's very different. I wasn't interested anymore. I felt bad. It's like, well, I'm going to be out of the loop. And it's like, no, you're going to be ahead of the loop. And yet it was this feeling of very, very definite change in lack of interest in the old drama. I
mhm,
was only interested in what can we build, where are we going, how are we
mhm,
going to unfold not only ourselves but this new world, and that's been my focus since February. So,
mhm.
and yes, I still get in there and watch every so often, but I think one of the things that I have felt all along is that more and more people are getting tired of the same old bad news. I guess I call it that. The same old drama, the same old, yeah, this is happening, this is what's going on, and we're to the point of, no, it's not in my world, not in my life. I'm not going there. And
Mhm.
I think that we're preparing for a big step, something
Yeah.
that's really, really big.
Mhm.
So I want to share this other thing as well. Um, I have classes going back. I have notes that I've taken from classes from way back, years and years ago. And I happened across some notes from a group that was looking at 2023. And the very last paragraph of that, it was like a small zigzag journey that one of the students was doing. And the report was something is very different in 2023. And there's a big, some sort of literally planetary change. And there's water in places there wasn't water, and there are no people in places where there were people. And the landscape, the geography is different, very different. And there's a big hole in the middle of the planet. And at the time, I thought, okay, I'm not sure. We'll just watch. So here we are in November of 2023, almost at the end. And I happened across that the other day and thought, I wonder if there's still something along those lines is still coming, if we have managed to smooth that over a little bit.
Mhm.
But there are people who are expecting that. And I didn't know that until earlier today when I happened across a thing that Carrie Cassidy put out. And I never have time to watch that stuff because it's so long. I don't have 2 hours to sit and watch or listen to anything. Um, and they were talking about this massive plate shift on the planet, and it just it kind of dovetailed with the change coming. And I thought, one of the things the little men in brown robes said was that when we're ready to clean up our act, Mother Earth will know that. Well, she'll sense that, and she'll help. She'll clean it up herself. And I've always worried about that. But I think if we continue to see the world we want, that's the world we're going to get.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that just takes us to the timeline thing. So I'll share some of my thoughts, about the timeline shift and try to answer some of the questions that people have asked. So, so let me just welcome everybody who's out there. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like such a beginner with StreamYard, and this is not my comfort zone, but I'm glad you're there. So this is about the timeline shift. And in the November Look-See, I shared like 5 events that happened over the past 12 months that I couldn't place. Usually I can see the events, the things happening in my dreams. I can see those events reflected directly in my everyday life. And I couldn't see these events anywhere. It's like, where does that fit? And so those 5 events reminded me of the little men in brown robes and their insistence that we had to create an alignment, and that we were going to have to do that in my lifetime. And the choice of an alignment was a big deal. It was a very big deal. And they said there were only 2 alignments to choose from. One was death and the other was life. So as I look back over the last 12 months, I think those first 3 experiences that I had of facing death, of fighting it, of refusing to give in, refusing to collapse, in helplessness or fear or panic or whatever, that was like a test and an indication to spirit that I'm not giving up, I'm not giving in, I'm not quitting and saying, okay, death, you won, period. And now that I look at those 3 events, 2 in spirit, 2 in consciousness, and 1 physically, it just strikes me again and again that I needed to have that fight in order to reaffirm to the spiritual side of life, to life itself, that I was committed to life. And I'll just kind of digress a little bit here. I think JSNP 4 had exactly the same kind of test last Friday when his plane crashed and he survived.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he
Was he in his helicopter?
no, he bought a plane. And he said he had 2 little things he put out. He looked pretty beat up. He had what I thought was a fracture on the sternum, or one of the ribs had cracked or pulled out of the sternum, and it was hard for him to breathe. And so he said he pulled on the throttle or pushed on it or something. Nothing happened, and he lost power. He said the plane just, and instead of panicking, he did what you have to do in that moment when you're confronted with death. It's like, okay, what can I do here? And he said his logic and his intuition is what took over. He headed for some very feathery looking pine trees, thinking that they would slow his speed, and just wrecked the plane, just wrecked it. So the plane tipped over, and he was out in a area that was very, I guess, was very isolated. And by gosh, within minutes, some guy and his daughter came by in a truck and found him and hauled him to the hospital.
Oh my gosh, that's a story right there.
Yeah, I know. And my thought was, oh, JSNP, you are having the same kind of test I've had to deal with, which is, you giving in, you giving up, you're going to panic, you're going to quit, you're going to, or no. So, that whole thing, I think that's happening for people, especially people that are here to, I'm going to say, anchor that new world. Yeah. So anyway, you have to prove that, by God, you're committed to life. and that you'll stand up for life, that you'll nurture life. So anyway, during that third life or death experience, that one that required emergency surgery, and I was moving back and forth between the hospital bed and a big ship, meeting with my people, we kept talking about the next step in creating a stable reality. And they, the only thing I could remember at first was that there was a lot of talk about this ratio 1.618, which in our world is known as the golden ratio. So that was it. But as it turned out, I began to remember more and more bits and pieces after the surgery and all the way through to September. More stuff kept coming. So if you watch the November look-see or listen to it, that ratio is that golden ratio is the basis of a hexagon-based timeline, a six-sided timeline, and the Fibonacci spiral, Fibonacci circle, or spiral. And that we had an opportunity to move on to an octagon-based timeline, which is eight-sided. And a hexagon-based timeline, let me not say anything bad about that. It's beautiful. It's all the forms, flowers, plants, animals, humans that we're familiar with. But that hexagon-based timeline is the basis for the limits in terms of the geometry, that the 3D geometries that we can build, and the mathematics that we can figure out, and the physics forces that are in operation. So it does create beautiful, beautiful forms. However, it doesn't carry us back to source. Six-sided geometries almost always crash and burn. They self-destruct. So that really bothered me. It's like, okay. So in other words, the hexagon-based timeline does not lead to life. So because it crashes in self-destruction and people have to start over. The whole civilization starts over, and we have started over. I think this is in Mexican folklore, is the time of the fifth sun or the sixth sun. I'm not sure which it is, but it indicates that we've had to start over 5 or 6 times. So if you die on that timeline, you'll probably get born back into it. There's nothing wrong with that. And you'll have another chance in the distant future to move on to an octagon-based timeline, which is a 4th or 5th dimensional timeline. That's the difference. So the octagon-based timeline is based on different mathematics, different geometry, and a much more expansive set of physics, much more. It also has or brings or allows a much richer set of harmonics and therefore much richer set of forms, complex forms. So it also creates plants, animals, and people, but it's based on just a slightly higher frequency set, and it leads to reconnection with source and the renewal that offers. And that is the big difference between the two timelines. There's nothing wrong with the timeline that we were on. However, it does, those 6-dimension or 6-sided hexagonal timelines tend to crash and burn over and over. And the 8-sided one offers this renewal. And that's what I think we are after in terms of becoming. So I think the notable thing about those two timelines is that they crossed. They crossed somewhere between November 8th and November 11th. And just today, when I was typing this up and typing 1111, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's what that means.
Yeah.
11 is the portal. That's where the crossing occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a number of years, we've been moving toward that crossing. And we've started to see more and more pieces of evidence about that. But along the way, I don't think, and this heads into some of the questions that people have asked me, how do I get on that good timeline, the higher timeline? Well, you have to pass tests. And the issue is that people don't know that they're being tested. So
Yeah.
here are the tests because they're not over and it's not too late. Okay, so what kind of tests are we having? They're tests like, are you able to tell the difference between truth and propaganda and then align yourself with truth? If you can't, you're going to be led down the merry path toward destruction. So another kind of test, can you recognize harmful orders or immoral laws and stand firm but non-combatively in non-compliance? In other words, you're just like, nope, not doing that. Not going to fight. Not going to argue with you. I'm not doing that. I'll take my lumps. And today, what just really struck me was a letter. I was reading this on Benjamin Fulford. He had a copy of a letter that was sent out by the United States Army inviting all of those soldiers who were dumped because they refused to get the vaccine to come back and to fix their record. Evidently, they were dumped or, thrown out of the Army and got what do they call that? A dishonorable discharge.
Mm.
So they can go back and correct that.
Oh, how very generous.
Yeah, I know, but that's the kind of test. Can you, if you're so close to getting your 3 stars as a general or a lieutenant or your pay, your 20 years and you're done kind of pay, and you get thrown out, that's a big test. That's a very hard decision.
Penny, the 3 ones that you've mentioned so far, it seems like just integrity.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but we've lost it. We've lost our integrity. So many people have.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't know who they are, so they don't know how to be.
Mm-hmm.
So another form of test is, are you able to distance yourself from the need to choose sides?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when the whole world seems to be taking sides and pushing you to do so. That is a sure sign of got to join the club one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't. You have to stand in your truth. You have to stand in your integrity, just like you said. Mm-hmm. So, and right now there's a lot of push, a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
To choose sides. Used to be, got to choose to be on the side of Ukraine. I'm looking at what's going on really and thinking, are you nuts? Okay. And now it's Israel. Number 4 on my list here is, can you remain non-combative in the face of unfairness or injustice and still keep your eye open for opportunities to get out of the situation with as little harm as possible?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of is like a Don Juan sort of test,
Mm-hmm.
the worthy enemy test. So if you know the whole story of the worthy enemy, it is pretty amazing. You take your lumps and you keep watching and you keep watching, and what you see is that the enemy digs their own grave and then falls right into it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is, can you muster the courage to stand alone on your principles? That's a big one. And I probably should have added, can you stand alone and not be preaching to everybody around you? Get yourself in trouble with family and friends and coworkers and what have you. Yeah. Can you help those who laughed at you or cursed you when they start to reap the results of their ignorance and bad choices? Are you going to be there? Can you offer anything? Can you help? Can you let go of the need to get even with somebody for something they did that hurt you or your loved ones? That's huge. That's forgiveness. Do you have the strength and the detachment to enforce justice when necessary? That's a big one right there. Enforcing justice sometimes has to be done, not because you want vengeance. And so it's a very tough, fine line to walk and to say, yeah, we have to do this. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to enforce justice? So there's not a whole lot of options here on this planet, but I think we're coming to a point where we're going to have to ask ourselves, how do we answer that question? How do we enforce justice? And then there are many, many like small personal tests of character and conduct that occur each day. Keeping your spirits up, not engaging in a whole lot of bitterness or angry exchanges or all that stuff. Getting hooked, just like you were talking about earlier. So from here on out, the two timelines are going to begin moving farther and farther apart. And for a while, I think everybody will be able to move back and forth between the two worlds. You'll fall down one day and pick yourself up and say, whoops, and get back on the higher consciousness line immediately or as soon as you can. So those who want a world of love, of peace, honesty, health, truth, trust, and harmony will be able to see the messes and the suffering and the sorrows, all the difficulties that are going on around them, but they won't get hooked by those. So they'll be able to hold on to their vision and their principles, doing their best to be creative and avoid getting tangled up in the activities of those who are acting out their anger. They're just miserable and they're acting out everywhere. So there will be some of that. But what I have seen over and over is that on the new timeline, all of that anger gets channeled beautifully into, we're doing this, damn it. That kind of, we're not falling for that, and we're not succumbing to that, and we're not playing that game. They're moving in a direction that anger is used to drive forward in a good direction. And that is how anger is supposed to be used.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, Penny. As I look at, a lot of the messy stuff that's going on the planet right now, and it doesn't engage me that much. I just think that's silly. It just doesn't work. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And however, I can say that having gone through the past how many number of years now has been so valuable, because as we move forward, I and millions more like me can say, oh no, we've done that. That doesn't work.
No, that's right.
That doesn't work. We know that. We know that very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's consider this, or let's consider this.
Yeah.
Because that feels more like it's expansive or creative or in the direction or the momentum that we know works, because we just came from what doesn't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have had such a magnificent set of lessons in what not to do, how not to behave, how not to run a country. It's been amazing, and we are the beneficiaries of that. And I was thinking earlier today about the hippies from the 1960s.
Mhm.
I could have been part of that if I hadn't gotten married and started having babies too soon. But um, I watched that from a distance, and what I saw was that they all grew past the hippie stage, and they began to fall in love. They started getting jobs. They graduated from college. They had babies. They got families. They took on mortgages, and all of a sudden they were in the system that
Mhm.
they had been protesting and fighting. Everybody was fighting the man at that time, and the man was the big corporations. And here we are now. We've come full circle, and what we're seeing is that the corporate structure, we have to deal with. That's going to be the next big thing for us in shaping reality. We need to deal with governance, our belief systems, and the corporations.
Yeah.
So
From
yeah.
my perspective, though, Penny, I look at the corporations, and maybe I'm naive and I haven't looked at a kind of deep dive in all levels, but it seems like an easier problem to solve because all we have to do is stop giving them our money.
Oh yeah. Oh well, let me continue on, because I'm going to bring that up. Okay. Um, so, where did I leave off? Those who are angry about the situation but are not acting out that anger are going to use it to drive their commitment to change. They will be fierce in their decisions. They will be uncompromising in their assessments. Just like you said, that doesn't work. We're not doing that again. They will be unwilling to overlook even a hint of corruption. They will be unwavering in their attitude that it's time to stop bringing harm to everything. So they will be willing to be uncomfortable for a very short period while adjustments are made. And they will use that anger as change energy. They'll use that anger to drive those adjustments to completion.
Mhm.
So they will be willing to work together in ways they have never worked before as they come together to reorganize and rebuild without waiting for governmental permission. That has been a huge, everybody says, well, who said you could do that?
I know.
Yeah. I just think that that's a giveaway right there. Do you have any power?
Mhm.
So those who were never comfortable, I love this. I've seen this a number of times. Those who were never comfortable in relationships in the old world will discover that they do quite well in the new world, because the new world allows everyone to be real, to be authentic, and to be yourself, and to accept those who are being real, who aren't pretending, who aren't putting up the facade. And so those people who really only, they don't want to bother with facades. They're not comfortable in relationships, and all of a sudden in the next dimension, or fifth world, 5D world, they're very comfortable. They like people.
Mhm.
That's amazing. As we move forward, things look gradually more positive from here forward, in spite of the fact that it looks like the money system goes through a big contraction, and so does the government and the corporate system. The United States is breaking up, but people are so relieved that the criminal naughty boys are not in control that they end up quite excited at
Mhm.
first. And then, of course, reality sets in. So here are some questions that we are going to have to answer if we want a fourth or fifth dimensional reality system. And this comes from the revival, the chapter on governance,
Mhm.
page 57. So if America was the first step into self-governance, we were the first ones to say, no, we'll govern ourselves. Thank you, sort of. Well, compared to the other systems,
Yeah.
what would the next step look like? what would that be?
Mhm.
How would we like to govern ourselves? What do you think? You think we're going to want any government at all, or how are we going to handle that? I look at that and think, wow, people are not going to want any governance for a while.
Mhm.
But that opens the door for gangs. So we don't want that either. So next question, who are we? Who are we and why do we exist, and how much oversight does an evolved population need? If we were treated as if we were little kids, unthinking, too dumb, too useless to make a decent, mature decision on our own, and we grow up, what do we need in terms of governance? Yeah, I agree a little bit. If the financial system contracts, who do you know that can produce the necessary goods and services? It's going to come down to, who do you know?
Mhm.
That's your people, including the Krabby Patties that you didn't want to have to deal with, but who have amazing skills. So, if the big global corporations are the key, and I don't think people have realized this, they're the key to control of the population.
Mhm.
Okay, big global corporations are the keys. And they contract or go bankrupt because the banking system has failed and no one has any money. Where will you get things like milk and bread, new socks and shampoo, or cell phones and computers? How will you survive long enough to create a beautiful new fourth dimension or fifth dimensional system? That's a big question. We have to be willing to go through a rough patch. We have to be willing to tough it out. We have to be willing to not give up. And we have to be willing to keep ourselves in good shape, good enough to be able to see our way through.
I want to jump in here, Penny, and just make a comment about that.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. Like, what are we going to do when Amazon is no longer delivering
Yeah.
and the grocery store hasn't had milk in 5 weeks?
Oh,
That to me is almost the precipice of the most exciting part, because what's been stifled about humanity is our innate creativity and our
oh,
problem-solving abilities. And
yeah.
that's going to bring out in people that who formerly were depressed or hated their jobs or didn't want to do this or that because they weren't engaged. All of a sudden, they're going to become so incredibly engaged. And that guy in his garage is going to start pilfering every Mac that's been turned into a Salvation Army for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And he's going to have a little garage filled with all new tech stuff for you. And that's going to be the beginning of a very exciting part of our evolution.
I know. And I have to add this. We had an Intuition 5 class this weekend, and the class is about past lives and future lives. And it's not what people think. People think, oh, past life, but it's much more than that. And so one of the things we do is these spot checks of the future. Just go look at certain dates and things. And one of the things that somebody said they were reporting what they had seen. They said grocery stores had mostly closed, but their parking lots became like the local trade center for groceries. Like all the farmers showed up there.
Yeah.
They had a farmer's market.
And better food and better prices.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I thought, oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty amazing. That's such a common sense application of, well, we all go to the grocery store to get groceries. Maybe we can only go 2 days a week because the farmers are only there 2 days. but we'll gather, and that will reestablish community as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we were looking at 2024 and 2025. So I can't wait to see what happens. um, so sticking on that question of the big global corporations, what if they survive in Asia, but nobody will do business with us because we have such a bad reputation? If trade comes to a stop, partly maybe because the dollar is worthless, but mostly because the US has a history of double dealing, of not keeping its word, and of being hogs when it comes to the markets, then how will we respond to that situation? Who is going to speak for us, and who will we trust to speak for us? So shaping the reality of the future means we have to reestablish honorable relationships with other people out there. That's not the bailiwick of a lot of people. There's a few people that will be here to interact internationally and to set up agreements. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, who will we trust to speak for us? There's a period where we don't trust anybody. We just don't. So then I moved to the revival chapter on religion. And this is from page 165. And this, I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs from that chapter. Quote, when you are raised to believe that you need to follow a religion and do what it tells you to do, the result can be frustration and a total distraction from the real path that would awaken you to the magnificence of your own being as this little tiny region of energy in this incomprehensibly huge ocean of love, whose energy is yours to use wisely and well. And you can use it whatever way you want. Use it to create structures and situations that promote self-aggrandizement and greed, imbalance, and you're going to meet with frequent destruction and starting over and over and over. Use it to create structures and situations that promote cooperation, enhance and nurture life, and you will discover the dynamics of eternity. Religions can be a springboard from which to step into a much more loving, aware, and expansive consciousness, because they all teach love. They all talk about love. They don't practice it very well, but they talk about it. So is there something happening right now that's pushing us to take that step? Yeah, the paradigm shift. The paradigm from 3D to 4D and 5D. And I think a lot of us have been kind of mucking around in 4D for a while, and now 5D is right there at our fingertips. So when any physical system reaches its peak of potential, it tends to become disorganized because it's going to either disintegrate or reorganize in a better, more inclusive, more powerful, and more realistic form. So in other words, a system evolves and it becomes wonderful and it reaches the peak of what it can be using that math and those forces and those belief systems and those lifestyles. And then it has to take a step up. It's not going to quit evolving. So there's a chaotic step in there in order to get to the next step, the next stair step. So what is the difference between religion and spirituality? Do people know what that big difference is? Religion is all about dogma, and spirituality is about the true spirit of yourself and developing that. When you do that, you will have developed your spirituality. What is your current understanding of enlightenment? I'm going to say the answer in a minute, but first I'm going to ask another question. Imagine that you are enlightened. Can you maintain that enlightenment and still go to work, do the laundry, feed your children, take the dog to the vet, and mow the grass? What does enlightenment mean? What does it do? How does it behave? How does it think? And especially, how does it feel? So, in maintaining this enlightenment, what would change about the way you do things? So, going back to what is your current understanding of enlightenment? Enlightenment is not just intellectual knowledge. It is literally turning into light. Period. And until I went into the hospital back in February and they told me, we're moving you, you've been in 4D, we're shifting you into 5D so that you can maintain what you're doing without problems with health. That what became clear and obvious after that was all these pieces that I had been mulling around for years, it all of a sudden crystallized. And I thought, oh, okay, I forgot that that whole effort to become enlightened literally means turning into light, and your flesh becomes different, and you feel different, and you have different capacities. Different capacities. So, in closing, I'll just say, let's keep our eye on the ball. And the ball actually represents the goal of creating and maintaining a reality system characterized by those things I mentioned a minute ago: love, peace, honesty, health, truth, trust, harmony, and a world that moves toward eternal life. If you're going to become eternal, you have to let yourself change. So be aware that you will change as your consciousness changes. And I can see that. I'm tracking that happening in myself right now. So let yourself love and let that love change you. So those are my thoughts for today.
Thank you, Penny.
Yeah.
As we wrap up that section and before the wild card, I just want to share that there have been times in the last several months that it's almost as though I can't 100% go into this reality because my heart would burst with so much love.
I know.
And it's just like, it's almost a fire too hot to go close to. My cat just jumped up on the table. Let me get him off.
She likes that fire.
Yeah. So it's that, and I have said to my guides, I feel like my heart's going to explode. You can't understand how it feels, to have that much appreciation or just love.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll share a little experience of a big expansion that I mentioned earlier that happened this weekend. I had been working since the February life and death thing on, okay, where am I now? What has happened to me now? Something is different. I'm not interested in the old stuff. I really only want to create the new. Sometimes I feel like I'm getting so old. It's like, oh my God, I'm never going to last. So I had this little thing that I would do from time to time, and I would just sit down on my bed and I would cross my legs and say, hey, God, or hey, source, whatever, a different name every time. I have a million names for that amazing, intelligent light that I have been in contact with for a long time. And, let's dream about this tonight, or let's have a moment where we reflect on such and such, or, let me see. I'm always asking for something. I'm like a little beggar child. So, so I had this particular experience of sitting on the bed and saying, hey, I feel like you're not paying attention to me. And I don't want to complain, but I need more evidence. I need some sign. So, and I'm so tired at that point. I just thought, well, come on, sleep with me. So I laid down and went to sleep instantly. Um, I woke up in the night and I had my left hand positioned in the weirdest position over my torso. And I could feel this energy just moving through me like a fountain. And I thought, in that kind of half asleep thing, I'm really just there's some kind of healing going on. And I was kind of foggy. But I noted that and I thought, don't move, just let it flow. So that morning, the next morning, I woke up and I'm laying there in the bed, and I always roll over on my back and start this kind of like a meditative breath work thing. And all of a sudden I had this little conversation, and the conversation was like this. I was saying there was some kind of healing going on in the night. I wonder what that was. And I heard this voice say, breathe into the body. So I do my usual, well, let's see, should I breathe into my jaw? Should I breathe into my back? Should, my knee, my what? And so I said, well, what part? That was all I said, what part? And the answer that came back was, there are no parts. It's all one. As soon as I heard that, my consciousness expanded and I became this humongous pool of light. And I could feel that all day, the entire day and all that night. So I go to bed the next night and I'm teaching, so it's a busy weekend. This isn't like you're doing anything unusual. But the next morning I woke up in a dream. I was in a room in Las Vegas, in a hotel room. And I was looking out this big window and over toward the mountains. And I see this huge planet. And there was something. Now, typically what I would do would be to, oh, look at that. There's a planet there. How'd they get there? What planet is that? I wonder what its name is. Who lives there? Blah, blah, blah. A million questions, all logic takes over. And I'm just looking at this planet and just looking at it. And all of a sudden, there's this little spiral of light, like like a belly button that formed in the middle of the planet. And this light, I don't know, shot out of it right at me. And I didn't move. It's like, oh, that thing is shooting me. Didn't move. And all of a sudden I could see all the stars in the entire sky. It was bright. It was midday. It was, the sun was shining and I could see all the stars. And I'm looking at those stars and thinking, isn't that beautiful? That was all I thought. And this feeling, I can't describe it, but it filled my entire self, lifted me up to the ceiling, and my head was at the ceiling, and I was thinking, watch out, don't scrape my head on the ceiling. And there was this knowing at the same time that something magnificent had shifted in my own system, and that my knowing about that was in the feeling, and there was this immediate understanding that like a reaffirmation of what I said earlier. If you don't feel the change and there's no obvious skill or capacity that comes with that new feeling, then nothing has changed. Nothing has happened. And this energy, and I was fully aware that I was levitating, and I wasn't excited. I was just observing. but it landed me on the desk. And I stood there on the desk thinking, wow. Yeah. And then my logic started to come through and I started waking up. But that feeling stayed with me, is still with me. That knowing that something has shifted, that there was some sort of action at a distance, some sort of energetic action that occurred when that belly button formed on that planet and shot me with that beam of light, and that new skills are there and waiting. And so I think, and what I have drawn from all of that is that's a preliminary step in the process of turning into something besides ordinary physical flesh. So I'll keep you updated in terms of what's happening there, but I was really very amazed. I was just kind of mind blown. And I, wrote it all down, the whole conversation, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we need, as a population, to understand that as we move into 4D and 5D, that change is going to show up in the body. It's going to show up in our feelings. It's going to show up in the way we use consciousness. It's going to show up in our chemistry, our heart rate, our everything, blood pressure, you name it. So that is, I think, something to look forward to with great excitement.
Yeah.
So
That's a great story. I can imagine it feels pretty good being you right now.
it has been wonderful. So,
yeah. And this kind of really dovetails nicely, Penny, into what I have for the wild card topic tonight.
Okay.
It's something that's, topical, that's going on the planet right now. I had watched a long interview by Lex Friedman. He was interviewing Elon Musk. It's 2.5 hours. It was long.
Oh, wow.
It was an interesting interview, but Elon Musk said something during the interview that I don't agree with.
Okay.
And what he said was he felt that there would always be wars on Earth, that was just the way it is. And I understand that from a lot of different perspectives. You can understand it from just the surface of the Earth, that humans just can't get along. You can understand it from the position of, well, Earth is a duality, so we have to have that constant tension. And my question is, why can't we, if this maintains, even as we move into higher dimensions, more of a duality system, why can't the tension be in creation, in creativity, in problem solving? In other words, instead of humans fighting, humans are working together to try to solve this problem that is very interesting and very intricate and very deep. Why can't we shift that tension to something that there is a beneficial outcome from?
Yeah. Yeah, let me say a couple things about that. First of all, a three-dimensional system is always going to have fights and wars, okay? That's a 3D system. Why? Because the people who come to a 3D system are looking for the power, the energy to make a core change. So they fight over power. They get all off track and all tangled up around what power is. And instead of changing their core self, they end up going after external power, and they come back again and again and again. And they mess things up for themselves as well as others again and again. A 4D system is when those who are, I'm going to use this, a biblical term, those who are ready to move up. Some of the off-planet people say those are the ones who are ready to be harvested. They move into a 4D system. They start doing exactly what you just said. Let's work together. Let's be creative. They still have a lot of the issues of the 3D that they have to work through, but they come together as a group and they start cooperating. They start being creative. They start building something that they think will be beautiful and true and not bring any harm to anybody. So that, we will have stuff on planet Earth, but in the three-dimensional system, that's like one channel. If you turn to another channel, it's a different frequency. You don't see that. You may see war, but it's always defensive.
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to get somebody else's resources as a form of power.
I would imagine if you have a civilization where the momentum is for creativity and growth and health and integrity, that
Right.
once that momentum starts, it
Oh,
can become pretty powerful and very
it
hard
is.
to pull back again.
Yeah.
Because if you've got all this integrity, all this good, loving intention, all this creative energy going in one direction, that's a pretty powerful force.
Yeah, it is. It is. And there is really no easy way to reverse that once you're in the energy flow of that, in the same way that it's difficult to reverse something that's going ugly. It's hard to reverse that. You have to be very choosy about what you step into, what river you step into or what timeline. A river is like a timeline. It flows in a direction and has certain curves and twists and turns, etc. So I think we're right in those crosshairs still. We're going to move further and further apart, but it'll take a couple of years to completely move past the ugliness, the hurt, the harm, the stuff that has gone on in the 3D world is shameful, really and truly. So we're in a place of, okay, let's move into that cooperation.
Yeah.
Let's move to that creativity, and we're going to have full-on opportunity to rebuild the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because everything we have is looking like it's going to go down.
I like a good fixer-upper. Okay, Penny, as we wrap up, can perhaps based on your experience multidimensionally, just if you could say a couple of things that we might expect. In other words, I've heard that there'll be people that just sort of fade away and it's like, I don't even know what happened to Bob. And then all of a sudden you don't even remember Bob's name. And, what types of things can we be noticing or expecting as things shift? I would imagine that anyone watching this is probably coming along on a more cooperative journey.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the things is to be looking for those Mandela effects that are out there. They happen a lot. And I just heard of another one. I was going to mention that. Now I can't remember what it was. It was like, oh, there's another one. And it was very public, whatever it was. So you're going to see that something that isn't. Or something that you never noticed before is right there. And people will say, well, that's always been there. And you're like, what? So that's one thing. I think another thing that I see happening that I think is absolutely stunning. So, and I have my ear to the ground. There are medical centers that are opening or that are being planned to open that are phenomenally integrative. It's conventional plus natural plus energy medicine all rolled into one. So herbs and real healing coming. That I see coming fairly quickly. I am concerned about the hospitals that I see a lot of hospitals going down over the next 5 years. What if you break a leg or you need something? But anyway, I think another thing that is really beautiful that is coming are these food technologies and food centers that focus on really developing food that has some real nutrition in it and doesn't have all of the chemicals, all of those terrible things that, today I was having crackers and peanut butter for just a little snack with my supper and was thinking about how peanut butter is made. I know how it's made. I still eat it. And it's we won't say how peanut butter is made, but it's not good. So a lot of the food becomes clean and nutritious and unadulterated and local. And I find that as a trigger for the development of community in a lot of places, not just a few. And there's a few cities that have a really hard time. And, I just, my heart goes out to them, but people will leave and they'll go elsewhere. That's coming. So we are moving into new kinds of housing, new kinds of energy, and there'll be some sun and some wind energy, solar and wind, but the new kinds of energy, oh my, OMG. No waste, no destruction, and almost no cost.
I know that to me is one of the most exciting things. I know it's there.
I know.
And I'm sure there's several people around the planet know
They're
it.
ready. They're ready.
Just not saying anything right now because
That's right. Yeah.
You can be disappeared if that happens.
Yeah. And they know it and they're smart and they're waiting for the naughty boys to lose their capacity to create havoc.
Yeah.
So I think another thing that I see that's wonderful is I don't think people realize how much of our weather has been manipulated.
Yeah.
Weather wars.
They do either.
And we're going to have a return to not only natural weather, but communication with the elements that gives us a sense of security around the weather in a lot of places. Every place that people care to connect with the wind, the sun, Mother Earth, I think the joy in that is amazing. There's new kinds of music and entertainment that are coming. I am looking at that going, oh, wow, I don't know if I would go to that, but it's interesting looking at. So, there are some wonderful things happening. I think we just need to keep on holding this space for all of that good stuff.
Yeah. We're in the middle of the kitchen remodel. We're in the ugly part.
Yes. Oh my. Oh yeah. Big disruption, but well worth it. Well worth it. Yeah.
Let's see. Can you guys create a Telegram channel so your community can talk to each other? That's something Penny can think about. Penny, just as an aside, quickly before we say goodbye, I would imagine that because of who you are and who you know, you're very connected with some of the technologies that are going to be coming out.
Yeah.
If you're ever interested in doing a show, we don't need to name names or companies or anything, but it'd be exciting for us to all, or at least for me, to have the opportunity to fantasize about
tech,
what's coming, the type of houses and, things that then, it's like, I feel like that energy would just expand. That could be a lot of fun.
Let's talk about that next time. That's one of my favorite things. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll do half the show on the look-see and half the show on what exciting things are coming.
Okay. All right. I love that. Perfect.
Right. Well, Penny, thank you so much for tonight. It's always such a joy to be able to touch base with you and just do a little bit deeper dive into the look-see, because I know that you have a limited amount of time when you record those, and having a little more intimate knowledge on what you're feeling and what you're seeing is very helpful for the rest of us. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I actually have a little partial look-see that I was thinking maybe I'd post over Thanksgiving weekend. Just more stuff just keeps coming. So
good. I'm sure we'd all love to see it.
All right. Real good.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So we'll see you next month at about the same time, same station.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's always such a delight to have you here. Go out and do wonderful, exciting, fun things.
Yes. Amen. Okay.
Take
All right.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow.